you said something the other day. I heard you talking about the food supply chain. Explain that. The supply chain with the food, you think there's going to be problems coming in the future. Can you explain that?
Enormous. Enormous. In fact, I'm glad you asked that question. Lagarde, Christine Lagarde, the president of the ECB, about, hold on, I'm going to give you exact time because that's how we do this. At 11:57 Chicago time, Lagarde made a statement, says Ukraine conflict means many countries will run short of cereals, meaning grains, in not too distant future. That's 2 hours ago. Now,
That's scary.
I think we are sitting on an international systemic emergency because, and I put it in this terms, I haven't been blogging because I've been on the road and I have a lot of things I think about. And my eyes have been a little fucked up, so my reading has been, but there is a massive grain shortage. And the massive grain shortage, and listen to how I'm going to phrase this, is due to the fact that Vladimir Putin has better sanctions than the US. Because he's blocking the outflow. Now, I talked to somebody briefly today who says, no, there's grain getting through, they're smuggling it. They're not smuggling enough because Putin won't allow it. Because Putin's people keep saying, if you want the grain to flow, let's sit down and remove sanctions on Russia. That's what he says. Said it yesterday, Peskov, spokesperson. And that's the same with European energy, by the way. You can pretend all you want that Europe can turn away from Russian energy, but I will state it categorically. You're living in a fantasy world. And to American politicians who say, well, that Europe isn't doing enough. Well, let me ask you, cocksuckers, and I'm sorry for my language, but that's how I am about it, is if your constituents were angry at the prices they were paying at the gas pump and for heating and air conditioning bills, how quick would you be to keep squeezing Russia and not allowing the energy in? And I think it's a valid question. Because believe me, when people see their utility bills this summer, they're not going to be happy, and they're going to think that gas at the pump is cheap. Don't laugh. I'm telling you what's coming at you. Now, international situation, Spec, and the question is a really good question, because food is something you don't screw with. Hungry people are a dangerous political entity. The emerging markets, forget about the developed world. The emerging markets, because I'll get to that. The developing world, the emerging market world, is really running the risk of having no food. And people are sitting here because it's so freaking expensive, and then there's not any, because the biggest part of Putin's sanctions are that fertilizer isn't getting, excuse the pun, spread around. It's just not, because 60% of the global potash comes out of Russia and Belarus. It ain't coming, and Putin's holding it back because he's trying to show everyone, well, you got sanctions, I have sanctions. He doesn't put it like that, but that's the fact. And unless you're willing to go in the United States Navy and blow out the Russian Navy blockading the Black Sea ports, and that's going to be the one step that the U.S. has said that they don't want to take, right? They don't want direct confrontation. So how do you resolve this? So I will tell you honestly, I've been buying rice futures when they break, and yeah, I make a little money, I lose a little money, but I'm just toying with them because I could break Putin. I'm telling you, I could break Putin if they had half a brain. I would use the IMF and their SDRs which the world always wants to spend more anyway. Those are the special drawing rights that the IMF issues, which are nothing but a basket of different members' currencies, and they give them out as a subsidy to a lot of emerging markets. But I would take those SDRs and I would give them to the World Food Bank and buy up every piece of grain from wheat to rice, especially rice, because there's more rice. Rice prices relative to wheat are really cheap. And rice is a substitutable staple to wheat, and make sure I had enough grain. And you would upset Putin. What they're sitting here and doing nothing is beyond me. They're talking about giving 40 billion to Ukraine. For 30 or 40 billion, you can secure a lot of the stockpiles if you're worried about the emerging markets. The fact that this White House, and this is not a political statement. I don't make political statements. This White House is concentrating on all the wrong things. How they are not doing this is beyond the pale for me. It reflects that they're always chasing. They're never leading. They're never proactive. They're always reactive. But I would be going after this in a big way, and it would really make an impact on Putin. The fact that they don't just empowers him more and more. But I think your question is a very good question. And I'll tell you what, the proof is in the pudding. July soybeans are still at $16.90. Now November is $15.24 because we haven't quite gone into a weather market yet. But if you get drought in the US this year, after the poor growing seasons in Brazil and Argentina and everything else that's going on in the world, wow. Everything that the question you asked, Beck, will become real. And the political fallout in a global way will be astronomical. So good question. And I think something has to be done with it.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, these are things I've been thinking about quite a bit because they're real. And what tells me they're real is grain prices are still here.
Okay, one last question, then if anybody else, I don't want to take up everybody's time, but Ira, could Swiss francs go back down to 35 cents?
No. Why would you think that? That's a quick no I gave you, but why would you think that?
No, because what goes up must come down. I know the times have changed. Maybe could the markets go, could the currencies go down? Let's say, could the Swiss franc go to 60, 70 cents?
Well, but let me ask you, just besides the fact that what goes up must come down?
Right, but it hasn't come down in years.
Yeah, but why? Yeah, it's a good question. Why would you think though that was a possibility?
Because if things get rough and there's inflation,
Yeah.
I would think people would maybe run to dollars. Listen, I'm not as smart as you are when it comes to this stuff. I'm just looking back from my trading days when I first started in the Swiss francs. They were trading 35 cents when I first met you. And everybody says the market's got to come back. I know they don't have to, but I just figured I'd throw it out there.
Okay, in that regards, it's a very good question, but I'll tell you this, and I have been consistent in stating this in the time that, especially since 2012, 13, and 14. And I know the Swiss pretty well. In fact, I was all over a month before they broke the peg in 2015 and a week before, and I was on Santelli talking about it, that it was a great possibility because I looked at the chart. So anybody, in fact, a group of guys, I don't know if you know them, but they have a fund now called the Praxis Fund, because I gave them my firm's name, but I was doing consulting for them. And they were long Swiss and short the euro because I pointed out what that chart looked like and that it reflected with all the Swiss intervention, they still couldn't move the Swiss off the floor, off the 120 peg. So it was pretty good and indicative. So I'm a pretty good watcher of the Swiss National Bank, one of my really good strengths. But the Swiss have worked something out here that nobody else has done. And yeah, they buy a lot of bonds, because they intervene a lot to keep. That's my problem with your question, is that they intervene to keep the currency weak. But one of the critical factors that they've done is that they've bought equities instead of bonds. So, you know, they own 8 billion worth of Apple. You know, they own 3,600 global stocks, probably about 300 or 400 billion worth. And they've done it with currency that they've created out of really midair. And people are still willing to buy the Swiss franc, and they take that and they buy stocks. So the Swiss, if they got worried about the Swiss getting too weak, could go and reverse that any day and start selling stocks, which would raise currency, and then they convert it back into Swiss franc. So I don't see that happening for that reason.
Okay. All right. I'm with my question.
Those are two really good questions, and a really good question. So they're very thoughtful.
Ira, Jake here. I just, it was coincidental that you were talking about potash. That's one of the things I was doing today. I've just bought my potash for next year, and these local retailers say, oh, it's going to go down. It's going to go down. I think they have no clue. And it just amazed me that you said potash. So I had to chime in on that.
Well, let's, who asked this? Jake?
Yeah, that's Jake. Yep.
Okay. See,
Farmer
Jake,
from Iowa.
Jake, I know your name. I know your voice so well that I can say that. So, you know, and that's a big part of the, going back to Specs question, that's a big part of the grain problem, because, you know, that idiot Samantha Power, who I can't stand, but when she about 5 weeks ago made a comment that you can just use more natural fertilizer, right? It wasn't going to be a problem.
What do they think they're doing with the natural fertilizer to begin with, right?
Well, so I guess Samantha Power thought if you give cows and horses X-Lax, you'd be able to make up for the fertilizer shortage, right? Because they shit so.
Not the case.
Yeah. So that was my, if I had a comedy show, I would be talking about that. But that's ridiculous. And you know, here, Jake, give them the numbers, give Spec the numbers. So if you can't afford a full load of potash, and let's say you cut it by 60 or 70% to save money, how much yield do you lose?
You might not lose that much in the first year. It might only be 15 or 20%, but you're going to start cutting real quick the following years. You know, you might be able to get by for a little while in your soil bank, but and that's in Iowa. Other areas of the country, you know, if you're used to growing 60 bushel beans, you're going to grow 30 bushel beans, you know, on the fringe areas or whatever.
And Iowa is the best farmland in the world. So take that.
Some of it.
Yeah. Right, you're right. So, but the point is,
you take nitrogen out of it, though, not to interrupt you, you're not going to grow a crop, you know.
But then you'd probably have to switch to more corn again, though, right?
You'd have to switch to beans. You could grow beans without nitrogen, but
you're right. You can't grow corn without nitrogen.
Yeah, you will grow. I mean, you would take 220 bushel corn down to 30 maybe. So that's all priced off of natural gas.
Yeah. Good. Also good point. So you know what? This, you know, in John Dezard's column months ago, back in February, when this first broke out, was a major statement about that, by the way. So we know what we're facing. And that's why if you get drought, holy shit, they won't know what hit them. And then, you know, Jake, you and I've talked before, if the White House moves to curtail grain exports, look out. And
you know, I said it this morning too, the only thing standing in the way of the government owning everything is a CME by trading these futures contracts, because otherwise they'd have control of the grain and of the oil. And then what would you have?
Yeah, really, I think about this and I'm amazed that they haven't made that move through the World Food Bank and the World Bank and the IMF to load up on whatever stockpiles they can find, because this is going to be a political catastrophe around the world. I'm not just talking about the US. And if you can do it with SDRs, holy shit, why wouldn't you be doing this? It boggles my mind that they're not promoting this.
And you're 100% right on hungry people. That's what's caused more revolutions than anything over the history of the world, right?
That's exactly right. And if you don't understand that about the world, you need to go back and read a lot, because there's a lot of really, and that's what Putin knows. And Putin and Xi know, and this morning they came out with a joint statement. They're just toying with the Biden White House now, and the Europeans, because they know that Biden and company have so much on their plate that they're just pot stirrers, right? They're like a 5-year-old playing with his 2-year-old and just wants 2-year-old brother just want to work them up because they want to distract and get it's just so much shit going on. And when I know that you're worried about potash, I'm worried about potash. And everybody sitting and listening better worry about potash. And you know what? The United States needs to be less arrogant. And I criticized, what's his name, when he was on 60 Minutes, the guy who put together the whole sanctions package, bragging about it. And I wrote a blog about it. I thought it was like a redo of Robert McNamara, who's a person I find so despicable that, I send logs to Satan to keep the fire hot under that asshole. That's how despicable he is. But the United States was so arrogant with these sanctions. Well, you know what? Again, I say Putin has better sanctions because he's hitting two major pressure points in the world. He's hitting energy and he's hitting food. And both were going up regardless. They were up. A lot of it was up because listening to Jermone Powell today was just, it's enough to make a grown man like me cry, by the way.
And the other side of it too, which you're just starting to touch on, is we're not even in a weather market yet, are we, Ira?
No, we're not close to a weather market. We're not close. If you weather market, as I said, oh my friggin' God, you are in. I can't even tell you. I think we'll see $25 beans.
Yeah. And this analysis that everybody loves to make fun of, Sue Martin, she said $30 beans last summer. Everybody called her crazy, but I don't think she is.
Yeah, no, there are things going on, and now with the and believe me, Putin knows, and he's doing his best to hold it back because pretty soon it'll be too late anyway, right? How long does the northern hemisphere have to get fertilizer down, where after the fact it really won't be that effective?
For this growing season, you mean?
Yeah,
Ira?
for this growing season.
So any of your spring crops, you're looking at the next probably 30 days here to get any effectiveness out of it. The spring wheat might go on a little bit longer than that, but your corn, your soybeans, it's done with. Whatever you had on or didn't have on, it's too late. Corn, you can put more nitrogen to it yet. Wheat, you can put some more nitrogen to it yet. But whatever you did or didn't do for the potash, which is potassium, or the phosphorus, it doesn't matter now. It's on the next year, because you're not going to gain anything out of whatever you put on now. But if you don't put your nitrogen on, you're just simply not going to have a crop if you don't have it on yet, and you don't get it on in the next few weeks.
I'll tell you what, one of the things we should be watching is China with these tariffs, because there's people in the White House who are pushing to remove tariffs in the hope of that bringing, and Powell talked about it today. It was the most ridiculous answer. Mike McKee asked him a question whether he's more concerned about core or headline inflation. And Powell said headline inflation, which just blew me away, by the way. That's the political answer. That's what the White House is concerned with. Most people are concerned more. Listen, for as long as I've been trading, we would always smooth it out and look at the core and go, well, that's minus energy and food, right? So
they're just continuing to kick the can, right? I mean, with the headline.
This is we are in some very dangerous moments here. But if they remove the tariffs on the Chinese, the Trump tariffs, which we know, which really hurt the American farmers, I blasted Peter Navarro for that because I thought that trade issue hurt the farmers because then the Chinese stopped buying. And those were bumper crop years, but they moved most of their buying, or as much as they possibly could, to Brazil. So Brazil picked up a lot of share from American farmers. Now, if all of a sudden you start removing them, I would watch China closely because China is always ahead of us on the weather because they have to watch the weather. They cannot afford to be caught off.
Right.
So I just bring that to the fore. You must pay attention to it because if the Chinese feel that we're going to see those $25 beans and that they've got concerns, believe me, they'll be buying everything at the Board of Trade for delivery, right?
Yeah, and they'll force delivery on it too, won't they? Or as much as they could,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we'll watch what the Nove beans do because of course the old crop, new crop. Right now the spreads once $1.70 or something. It went out to $2, I know, but these are very critical issues, and they're also issues that the White House is purportedly worried about because they're worried about headline inflation, right? And if food prices are going up, headline inflation is not your friend.
No, not at all.
And I'll add one thing to it, which kind of came out today. This is Mark, by the way, is,
Yeah.
Biden, we talked about this in the room quite a bit about, spare refining capacity and now how Biden admin is in a conundrum of trying to blame, quote, I'll put it in air quotes, big oil for gasoline prices. And they're making too much money. And we kind of went into that earlier where Jake alluded to, the futures market is the only thing that's in between the government and these commodity folks. But I will say that, refiners, not big oil, but refiners, two different things, don't set gasoline prices.
Hold on, let me put you on hold for 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ellie.
Hello.
Hi.
So someone made a good point about
Jake, what did you said? That's a great point. Could you say that again about how? What did you say? The futures market is the only thing between farmers and the government. Was it farmers? You said?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
just everything, Mark. Whether it's oil producers or just enacting price control on anything that you buy and sell. Car manufacturers, just anything that's a product there traded, because if not, who's going to set the price on that? The government going to set the price.
You want to nationalize the oil companies, right? Look what Russia did. You want to
Look
nationalize
at
the
Venezuela.
banks? Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and nationalize everything and find out what happens, because that's what they want to do.
You take all the incentives away that capitalism truly brings to produce something better and cheaper, whether it's a Chevy car or a bushel of corn or a gallon of gasoline or whatever it is. And it's not beneficial to anybody. But I don't know. I truly believe that. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's my deep thought for the day, I guess.
Well, government power is slipping, and they're going to try to tighten the straps as hard as they can. I mean, I would love to ask Ira, has he witnessed any type of government overreach like this in modern history? Maybe going back to the 60s. We don't know.
Soviet Union.
Right. Well, I'd say U.S. government overreach. Now, technology now has allowed the people to kind of access information far differently than what they could do, say, back in the 60s when, most folks got their news from the nightly news, and they can control the narrative or the newspaper. Right now, anybody could tweet anything, repost a link, and what have you. So technology is giving people more of a platform, which I think is one of the main issues that the government has with citizens.
Not only that, it's opened up the world market to them too,
Yep.
along those same lines.
Well, Ira's favorite Bloomberg columnist called.
Yeah.
There was nothing
I'll
different
be
than
back in a minute.
Oh, I kind of want to hear Alex talk. Mute us out. Don't mute us out. What's going on with crude today, Mark?
I had to step off the desk. I was on a call, and we're down $3 right now on what's the dollar doing? I had a bubble in my tire.
Dollars rallying.
Yeah.
It broke a little bit after the Fed.
Yeah, it did break. I did see it did break. I don't know. I think the market's a little jittery in regards to crude oil and gasoline. Is a little jittery in regards to what Granholm and Biden said about taxing oil companies. So potentially they want to tax profits of air quotes oil companies and energy companies. They're saying they're making too much margin. So this is kind of where I was going to go and speak to Ira about this and lend some thoughts on that. But yeah, you can't. And we talked about this earlier in the room.
Do you think that'll chase them out of the U.S. more, Mark, with them wanting to tax more of it?
No, I mean, you're down about six or seven refineries right now. So DOE's came out today, EIA data, and refinery utilization, which
All
means
right, I'm back.
Oh, perfect.
What question?
So where I was going with that, and I was just getting back into it, is we talked about, I forget exactly where I was, but I was talking about, about how Biden says, and Granholm came out and said they're going to utilize every tool in their toolbox to get gasoline prices down, because we talked about energy being, we talked about this for the past 6 or 7 months, going back to January, where we talked about, well, are they going to hike 25 or are they going to hike 50? They need to hike 50, and they hiked 25, I think, 2 times after. And you and I and everybody else in the room said there's no way energy is going lower, and that's going to be the Achilles heel with headline inflation. Yep. And they're coming out today and saying, oh, we're going to do everything in our power beyond what they've said and tried to do already with SPRs and all the other nonsense about getting gasoline prices lower. Mm-hmm. Problem is, it just came out today, and you had spoke about China. Spare refining capacity is not in the U.S. The U.S. right now is operating at 94% refinery utilization, meaning there's only 4 or 5% of spare capacity to crank these refiners up to make more fuel. Mm-hmm. It's within China. So China right now, 2 years ago during COVID, they started importing and holding a lot of commodities, and energy was one of them. Right now, the biggest issue is that China is turned off all their exports. So typically, they have a lot of teapot refiners. They export a lot of distillates and gasolines. Mm-hmm. They are exporting very little. So as far as any spare capacity for refining and refinished products, it would have to come from China. And they are building up their supply and their reserves for this winter, because they foresee, if it's a cold winter they're going to have to burn a lot of diesel to keep the lights on for their folks, because LNG and natural gas is a big issue come this winter. So I'd like to see how that relates with the tariff situation. And, if we release the tariffs, will that mean that China will export more diesel to kind of grease the skids of global supply?
Yeah. It's a phenomenal point. And don't forget, they're also buying discounted Russian oil. They're arbitraging the shit out of the global market.
Yep.
So they're winning at all ends, and the world's going to have to look to them. Again, there's no foresight on the part of US policymakers. They need to sit down with Putin. They need to stop either that or then say, fuck it, we're going to all out war and whatever happens. Because you can't have it all ways here. You cannot have it all ways. I'm sorry, just it's not going to work that way. You cannot have it all ways. You are going to have to make a decision about how you're going to approach the world. And you've been beating your chest and wait till Americans figure out that the LNG that they're shipping to Europe, right, is helping drive their utility bills higher.
Yeah.
Oh, gee. Again, there's no forethought. There's no forethought. It's just everything's a reaction. It's a delayed reaction, and it's always the wrong reaction. And I'll tell you what, the Fed also, and not one question again from the goddamn journalists, not one question, does the strength of the dollar have any impact on how the Fed, not one question. How do you not have a journalist ask that question? It is at a critical juncture. And I'm not the only one thinking about this now. I will say I was probably at the forefront of it, but I've been reading others they're looking at this dollar and it's helping drive up energy and food prices ever higher. That's why I would start utilizing the SDRs. But again, boggles my mind. No, there is no forethought as to how to confront these issues. Because there are policies that you could invoke rather than just, sanctions.
So Ira, I forget how many PhDs you said are sitting around the Fed, but you'd have to believe
hundreds.
Yeah, and I talked to a retired oil executive who's very good friends of mine, who has access to some of the largest refining companies in the U.S. And he said at CERAWeek over in Europe, Granholm was booed off the stage by some high, white collar execs when she was over there trying to tout we're supportive of the energy industry and you guys have to pump more oil and refine more product. They were absolutely annihilating her on stage, where it was the point of embarrassment. They said, I don't know how, I think this was a closed door meeting, but they were basically saying, you're a fucking idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're going to cause tremendous problems and pain. This was probably going back. I think CERAWeek was back in the spring. Mm-hmm. And what have they done? You're spending $6 a gallon of gasoline, $7 a gallon of gasoline, and distillate prices. I mean, look at diesel. It's up 3% today. Heating oil futures are up 3% in the front. Crude's off 3%. And we're talking about truckers and how that relates to, and how they're just passing the costs on to consumers, and there's not a lot of drivers. I'm real curious to see what. Yeah, I'm real curious to see what tools that they have, quote unquote, in their tool chest. Are they going to try to tax these oil companies?
Well, he just came out and said that just while we've been talking, by the way. So, but let me, that comes back to a great point. And
doesn't solve supply.
When I went on in November on this progressive radio show with Joan Esposito, I don't know whether I've talked. So every once in a while, I'll do one of her shows. She's out of Chicago, and it's Radio 820. And it was right after the November elections in 2021. And like a day after, they announced the Strategic Petroleum Reserve release, right? Now, I was on her show, and she knows I don't make political statements. That's not what I look at policy. If you know my politics, or if you think you know my politics, I've either made a mistake or you've misheard, or you've read something into it that I didn't intend to. But she asked me, and she said, well, this is a good idea. I said, no, it's not a good idea. It's the optics of the White House because their political operatives have told them that headline inflation is what hurt the Democrats in the 2021 November elections, and that going into 2022, they need to confront headline inflation. I said, that's why he's opening the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And I know we've talked about this in this room, that it would have no impact, it would be a disaster. And the real outcome would be windfall profits for the large refiners, because they're the only ones who can take this anyway. I have to say, it was dead on, dead on, dead on, dead on, and here we are, it's still dead on. And number two, I wrote her on, because she didn't have me back at all. So 4 months after that, I wrote her an email. I said, Joan, you know, you've had me on. I said, is there a reason you don't have me on? I know you read the blog, but everything we talked about last time came to fruition. So is it not worthy of having more discussions? So she actually sent me an email and she put me on the next week. We never even talked about that. We talked about other things, but I did say everything we talked about came to fruition. What a bad idea it was. It's a terrible idea. All it is doing, and now because they've made windfall profits, you know, I don't know how many readers there are there, but if you really want to read a great chapter, and I mean a phenomenal chapter, I carry it, and Bruce, he's not, but I carry this chapter. It's out of the Brothers Karamazov, and it's called The Grand Inquisitor. And it is a phenomenal piece of literature by Dostoevsky. I suggest, if you don't have to read all of the Brothers Karamazov, read The Grand Inquisitor, and you will be amazed at what a great, and this is how the White House operates. They want to give money. They unintentionally fill the pockets of the refiners with money, and then they want to say, well, here, now we're going to take it from you. With our right hand gave it to you, and our left hand is going to take it from you. That's what this policy is. Yeah. And terrible. Opening the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for the sole purpose of combating headline inflation was a terrible policy. And I don't care whether it was Trump, I don't care whether it was George Bush, I don't care who it was, a terrible policy.
Yeah, because I've known you spoke about copper before.
Yeah,
I'd like to pick your brain about copper. So there's a podcast, a Bloomberg podcast called Odd Lots, the one with Jeff Curry. So for any of you out there who haven't listened to it, the one with Jeff Curry from Goldman Sachs about underinvestment in energy and refining as a whole, that he gives great insight to that, and Goldman's been kind of dead on the past 2 years. In 2015 and so on, that they got the crude, the Bakken boom kind of wrong.
Yeah.
But then there's another podcast about, you know, copper and the lithium shortage that's coming, and it's going to be real interesting over the next couple of years. So I guess I'll paraphrase. 2 years ago, they talked about how there was a copper glut, not a copper glut, a lithium glut. And demand not as high as demand, and they said that has completely inverted and flipped. Now lithium demand has gone much higher,
right?
And grade A lithium, a lot of it's in Ukraine and Russia, Afghanistan and China. Now there's going to be, they said within the next 1 to 2 years, a big time lithium shortage. And what's that going to do to, you know, copper, uranium, and the rest of that market? It's going to be fascinating to me, and the reliance on copper, which hasn't been performing that well as of late. But I think that's going to be potentially, you know, if there's this big, huge push for lithium batteries and grade A lithium, there's going to be a huge, huge play for that, I think, in the next couple of years, according to what they said.
Listen, it's one of the reasons that I love Glencore so much. So yes, I've researched this tremendously. And China's sitting on massive supplies of lithium, by the way, because they mine a lot of lithium. Wow, this world, it's really phenomenally. Your question is just dead on phenomenal. And where it goes, but if you want electric vehicles, it comes with lithium up to this point.
Right.
It's part of why even the Chinese and the Japanese still don't give up on hydrogen fuel cells, by the way. Because they're spending fortunes trying to figure out a greater efficiency. And they're getting close because China has buses that run on hydrogen fuel cells and they own 25% of Ballard Power. So lots of things in play here, and all great questions. And copper is going to remain in huge demand as long as you keep pushing for the new green revolution of energy, right? Can't get away from it.
Right. Right.
You cannot get away from it. It's just there for everybody's situation. You cannot get away from it. It's not possible. It's not possible. We are caught in this almost like a vortex, you know, where if we're going to keep chasing it, and I'm not making a kick or a statement about it or not, you know what? It is what it is in the most proverbial sense. So we'll see where it goes. I don't know, but these shortages are real, and that's where a lot of the people who are green people fall foul, because what it costs to mine this stuff and the amount of energy that it takes to mine this stuff and the places you have to go and the politics that you have to play makes a lot of people, you know, again, don't let the facts get in the way. Don't let them get in the way. Just, you know, believe what you want to believe. But, you know, as a guy, I keep coming back to Deng Xiaoping, and I reside on that statement, which is, hey, his statement is this: practice, PARCTICE, is the sole criterion for judging truth. And that's what I'm interested in. You know what? Challenge me, beat me up, but bring the goods and let's talk about it. But I'm just not knee-jerk believing everything that I hear about, everything that they want to sell me. So the world is in the middle of a shitstorm. And I'll tell you, I'm watching Putin and Xi, who are just pot stirrers and stirring it up and stirring it up and stirring it up. And I'm glad that Jake came on and talked about potash, because this is a very serious issue. And again, what does the White House talk about? Samantha Power, that we need, you know, more manure. Yeah, we could do this. You know, you just replace manure. It was such a ridiculous statement and so naive that, you know, I have nothing else to say about it. But
at the same time, they want to get rid of livestock, Ira.
yeah,
They want to quit producing it.
Yeah, I forgot about that aspect of it. Yeah, it's true. It's sometimes you just shake your head and go, huh? Really? This is all you got? And the lack of fertilizer, believe me, India's cutting back. It's a global thing, and India's, you know, has really been one of the greatest examples of the true green revolution from the 70s and the phenomenal revolution in agriculture. India benefited as much as anybody with wheat and rice, but if they can't get that fertilizer down, yields are going to, and Jake said 20%. Well, 20% in a supply restrained market is enormous. And I have to tell you something, grain prices have been strong, and we've talked about this quite a bit, even with record crops. You had $10 beans, even with Brazil and the US having record crops for 2 years. So during COVID, grain supplies, there were no bottlenecks in grain supplies, by the way, because they produced record harvests, Brazil and the US. So, you know, again, look at the entire picture, put everything into context, and see where we go, because we do get a far different picture.
Somebody asked earlier,
I can
Ira,
talk
about
the
them.
Fed. I'll talk.
No,
more.
go ahead. Yeah,
The interest rates
go ahead. What?
pretty hard, but
Yes.
we talked about that the other day, Matt, that we wouldn't be surprised to see contra rallies, right?
No, and we got him.
And we did get them because now the market's not so, the market was starting to think, well, they're going to come at 75. Powell was very weak today, very weak. You know, his whole, again, why the hell he wanted the job again, I have no idea. He could have left with his, he could have left with like Michael Jordan on top, but now he's going to go out, you know, hanging on to one more. Yeah, I really thought he was pathetic, but I'm not a Powell fan. As I say, I don't come to praise him, I come to bury him. So I'll stick with that.
The yield curve had a pretty interesting move, flattened
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
dramatically.
well, it's been so, I mean, it inverted significantly, but a lot of this is also coming out of Europe because you saw the quote unquote fragmentation taking place in the European bond markets. But that, if they weren't expecting that, then they have to be idiots, because as soon as they start doing less, the market does what the market is supposed to do and challenges their policies.
DT, you going to say something?
Let me come back. Hold on.
Somebody had asked earlier about real estate, and what you thought was going to happen with real estate with rates going higher.
Oh, about what? I'm sorry.
Real estate. Spiros was asking.
Well, that was the last question to Powell, by the way, by the guy from, what was it called? Bank Rate, talking about it. And Powell danced that one too. I think real estate, well, look at, you saw Redfin and Compass lay off people yesterday. So that business is starting to slow. Prices are, you know, a little sticky upside because people are going, well, if rates go higher, you know, I'm going to have to buy now. But what they don't understand, let the markets, you know, it's like I'm telling my own kids, let the markets correct a little bit. Yeah, you're going to pay a little bit more for a mortgage, but if you can save 10 or 15% off the elevated prices, you'll probably come out about even. So, you know, do the math, but there's more stuff coming on the market because a lot of people my age held their stuff off because they believe everything that they hear too. And now they're going, well, maybe I'm not going to get as much. And that's the truth. So
If you're sitting on a pile of cash, then you're sitting in the catbird seat.
Yeah, you can go start, you know what? And now you get a little negotiate. Now I think the days of people running there and being bidding wars for everything. I told you I have a friend. He's, in fact, I'm going to have, I was supposed to have dinner with him Monday night here in New York, but my granddaughter had a fever and we traveled by train with her. So he's 94 and his wife is 83, and they're absolutely wonderful people in so many ways. But they sold their house because they're moving to North Carolina. In Arizona. They live, I play golf with them quite a bit. I really enjoy their company. His wife's a pistol. And they sold their house and he put it on the market for $1.7 million. And they had a bidding war going on in front of them. It was at $2 million, he stopped it. There were 7 people actively bidding for the house. He said, nope, first person that took, he says, it's yours. I'm not letting this go on anymore. This is absolutely ridiculous. They stopped it. The realtor said, what are you doing? He says, this is ridiculous. Ridiculous. I've got more than I wanted. I was asking, you know, more than I asked. It's ridiculous. So he stopped it. That's highly unusual, but at 94, it was just a matter that he was going to leave his kids a few more dollars. And, you know, he was not in favor of it. He couldn't watch it anymore. And he's a real estate guy.
I thought maybe you were talking about Leo.
No. He's the guy, him and I know his younger partner, but They did the Montgomery Ward building.
How is Leo? You talked to him?
Huh?
How is Leo?
You know, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. He's doing good, but he's in Chicago. He's not here. He's not
Oh,
here.
he is?
I'm not in Arizona either. Yeah, he's in Chicago for a while. I don't know when he's coming back. You know, I haven't, but we haven't talked to, you know, I was worried about it. Always check in about his health. You know, he's no youngster either. I only hang around with old people.
That's because you were an old soul when you were
Yeah,
a young
no,
man.
because I'm gonna, because it makes you, you know, I have a good time with him. You know, if you're, that's it. If I can be 94, this guy he's 94. He gave up skiing 2 years ago. He skied every day in the winter.
That's exactly how I'm looking to live my life. That's why I'm
Yeah,
doing
good
yoga
luck.
and working out. I want to be 102 and still ski.
I hope so too. And I believe I play golf with him. Yeah, I let him play from the up tees, but I give him shit about it.
He's still playing at 94.
I'll tell you what, when COVID started and they didn't let carts out, so he carried like 7 or 8 clubs in a bag for 9 holes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. But I do make fun of him because he plays those Costco golf balls.
If you were to let that out,
They are good golf balls. But whenever I find one, because people, you know what? I haven't bought a golf ball in 4 years. People just, you know, I look into cactuses. I always say I got some more balls. I view it as a successful round if I find more balls than I lose.
Yeah, I had a friend who lives on a course in Houston in the Woodlands. And
I love the wood. That's a great course.
yeah, and I had stopped down to see him. He lives on a dog leg, and he goes, hey, you need any? I said, I only have a carry-on with me. I didn't check a bag. He's like, all right, well, here's a giant freezer Ziploc bag of Pro V1s, and everyone just hits him into his backyard. He's got a big flower pot, like a 30-gallon flower pot, just full of golf balls. It's always a fun conversation piece why he has so many golf balls.
Yeah, I go, if I'm playing golf, it's amazing how many golf people just leave them. I don't even have to look far. They don't want, you know, especially when the snakes come out.
Yeah.
Stop looking, you know, but if I'm, because usually I walk and carry my clubs, so I'll find them and I go, geez, I found 8 golf balls today. I lost 2. I'm up 6. How was your round? I'm 6. I'm good. I'm good.
That's funny.
You know, I'm not making light of the Fed. Yeah, they raised 75 basis points. I thought the press conference was absolutely very weak, but so did the market, and that's why you saw the way the one thing I'm pissed about is I didn't buy these Fed funds contract, because when they had it even right before the Fed statement. It was trading around 3.5% yield. And I said, wow, this is really pretty rich. You know, and I'm looking at the market going, you know, the interest rate market is not taking into account that we're going into a political election. You know, right after Labor Day, we're in full force for a political election. So the Fed has a tendency to have cold feet. That's historically. That's not to say the only one who had any, Jimmy Carter unleashed Volcker, and Volcker, you know, did. And I always will give Jimmy Carter. I couldn't stand the Carter presidency, but I thought Carter had enough balls to really not fight Volcker. And Volcker really, he made it impossible for Jimmy Carter to get reelected. Well, Jimmy Carter did his best too, but Volcker going after the inflation in such an aggressive way, and he didn't get any pushback from Carter. Carter actually spurred him on. I always give Jimmy Carter credit for that.
I'm going to guess that's why we didn't get a point or a point and a half today. We got 75 basis points.
I don't know if you saw Gunlodge. You know, Gunlodge he went to his inner Ira Harris because he said that Powell should raise he should raise rates to 3% today. So I was laughing, because I've been there, and he should have done this long ago, and his path to life would have been far simpler. But it was, and that idiot Nick Timmeros, I have no respect for him. I would never read a column of his. He has no integrity because he sold his soul to be Powell's bitch, so to speak, because he had the 3/4 point story, and that was the Fed dropping a dime to get it out there, so as not to spook the markets. They spooked them 2 days ahead of time, and they go, "See, we didn't spook the market." Yeah, get the hell out of here, will you please? So to me, he sold his journalistic credibility. To me, he's kind of like Jerry Lewis and Damn Yankees.
That was surprising. I wasn't expecting that. That was
So I'm on vacation. I'm full of piss and vinegar. How unusual, I know.
You should be. How long are you in New York for?
Until next Tuesday.
You guys aren't swinging
I
through
was in
Chicago on the way
Maryland.
home,
I was in Maryland. I'm seeing the grandkids, and it's only 115 in Phoenix. So,
oh my gosh, you're not going to swing through Chicago on the way, are you?
I was going to, what? But I got doctor's appointment. My eyes are really screwed up, and I get in all kind of blue dots when I can't see for the first half an hour. I wake up in the morning until I put. And I've never put things, my eyes have always been so good. But my wife is kind of going, "I told you," and she says, and I said, "If you didn't take care of your eyes, I am not reading to you."
You gotta get those cataracts done.
Yeah, I've got an eye doctor appointment. So I got some doctor's appointments I have to take care of. So, and I really should go to Chicago for my doctors, but I'm just an Arizona guy now. But I'll take any other questions because I'm sitting here. My wife I took care of the baby this morning, and Alex had to be on, but she was busy this morning. So she was working from home. So I took care of her. I took care of the baby. I said, "Yeah, I got 3 hours." So I played with took her to the park. Me and literally 120 nannies. Oh, if I was a younger man.
Eye candy.
There was no
Are you
eye
a
candy,
papa?
but that's okay. Yeah, it's okay. But I have a good, really, my granddaughter turned 2 yesterday. So, and she's a pistol. So, but I'll tell you what, I don't know how they did this having her and raising her during COVID and both working from home. When I see it in an 800 square foot apartment, it is amazing. I told my daughter, I said, "There'd only be one of you, not 4.
800 square feet. That I couldn't even imagine.
But there, my son-in-law is an order freak, and it's really works out very well. So, because you got to have everything in order. But wow, that's all I can say. And you're dealing with an infant and then and now a toddler. But they were smart. Daycare at 6 months, and that was good. But she went for 3 days. Now but she's been homesick for a couple of days, and I see the way they have to work. And I give them a lot of credit. My heart goes out to them because it cannot have been easy. But
no.
All right. Any other questions? I will think about. Oh, one last thing on the Fed. And I don't know whether you really notice this. Critical thing, and not one person asked about it, because again, they come with their questions pre-made, so they don't adjust. There was one no vote today on the 75. Anybody know that?
Oh yeah, yes. And nobody asked about that dissension.
And the dissension was from the most legitimate hawk on the committee, Esther George.
Yes.
Dissented previously for too loose. She dissented in only 1.5. That was very interesting to me. Because what is she seeing? She's at the Kansas City Fed, and it's the Kansas City Fed that hosts Jackson Hole. So what is she seeing that prompted her to only vote for a half? Because when I heard she dissented, my first guess was she wanted 1 full point.
What are you concerned that, what are you concerned about?
That she's starting to see some slowdown take place.
So. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Not sure.
it's only, I'm
Somebody
sorry.
should have asked that question. I can't believe that nobody asked it. I'm serious. It boggles my mind that nobody asked that question.
At this point, isn't it a matter of time before things slow down?
Well, yeah, but even Powell talked, and I think this is why interest rates turned around. And as soon as I saw it, that's when the gold started to rally. When he talked about that, and the media did ask that question twice about tightening financial conditions. You know, again, this was her objective. He said this, and I don't know why people forget it. He said, we don't have the tools to create supply. So the only thing we can do is basically tighten financial conditions, which is destroying wealth, which will then lead to less demand. That was his answer at the last meeting about, or in March rather, how they were going to attack, you know, slowing down inflation. So it is, you know, I think that's why the market viewed this somewhat as not as hot. He like sent the message to prep the market that they were really concerned, but everything that went with it was kind of soft in the way that I read it. So, and that Esther George dissension should have been question number one. That is a very interesting dissension. Because again, she's got the most hawkish credentials there.
Yeah, I've got to look at that.
And I read the statement, you know, before, but that begs a lot of questions, man, to me.
Hopefully somebody will investigate it a little bit more. Will she speak about it? Will somebody ask her?
Somebody might have. Esther George is very outspoken. I'd like to hear. Oh, you know what? Hold on. If we got more questions, because I'm going to send I'm not name dropping here. You know who I talk to, and then I have access.
Yes.
I'm going to send an email right now, okay, to Danielle Booth. And I'm going to ask her, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm asking her. Did it surprise you that Esther George dissented for a lower rate rise? Let's see if she gets back to me. Let's sit here and talk a little bit more, and I'll give you an update. Let's see. I'm going to send it to her right now. Usually she gets back to me. We have a pretty good relation. That's the greatness of doing those podcasts. Oh, I have a podcast next week when I get back. This is one I'm really excited about. Let's see. It's with Martin Barnes. You know who Martin Barnes is?
No, I don't.
Him and Donald Story started Bank Credit Analyst, which is one publication I hold in the highest regard.
Hey, Ira, I had a question. My understanding is that the National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, like Chinese elections, are held like once every 5 years, and this will be the 20th annual in like the second half of 2020. There's no official date yet.
In October, I think, at called the party plenum, yeah.
Do you see that affecting anything, like the way that maybe they have one stance going into the election and then afterwards they switch the stance because they've been elected, like affecting the grain markets or anything really on that?
Yeah, who asked this question?
It's Joey, young Joey. Joey's in his early 20s.
Joey, that's a great question.
I'm 30, PAX. But you're 43, right?
Yeah, that's not funny.
Who, me?
Oh, yes, both of us.
My shoes are 23. That is a great question. And I hadn't thought about that. But going to the plenum, because everybody's talking about, and I know why you're asking that. It shows you that you're very well read, that Xi is having all these underlying problems, But then I read other Chinese experts who I have a lot of respect for. And they say, no, don't fall for that. That's not so. But if food is going to be a problem, that makes the case too, that they will start, and they'll probably be buying, well, November beans are probably something to watch for that, because if we don't get a weather market, and if Jake's still on, and the November beans, if that spread starts to close, that'll be a tell that without a weather market, I'm qualifying it by saying not a weather market, it'll be an indication that the Chinese are possibly worried about food. So I think you make a great point. The September contracts, like the September wheat, the September beans, are usually bastard contracts, as they would call them at the Board of Trade. But if they start to get a lot of play, it'll be that the Chinese really are concerned, because if there are food inflation problems in China, then Xi can have some problems and the Communist Party can have some problems. But I think they own the largest stockpile of wheat in the world anyway. But if they started stockpiling rice and other things, it's a very good question. Something to watch as we go into this. That's a great question.
Do you see them like holding off on maybe more purchases until the election and right after resuming, or what do you see it?
I think that they had been in that position because we saw the grain prices, after the Brazilian harvest. I think the Chinese did step back, but I think they stepped right back in, and the USDA export numbers started to reflect it, because where the Chinese hadn't been involved in the market, all of a sudden they started reporting all this buying by China, so I think that they've been back in the market. And I think the Russian situation caught them off off guard too, with how it exploded and how and Putin's preventing of the exports and the bombing of railways, to prevent it. So I think they got caught off a little bit by that. But I think their stockpiles are high enough. But if they do get nervous, you make a really, 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 really good point, and it's worth watching. That's why these conversations, because we ferret out this stuff, and it's a very, very important point. So thanks for asking that. See, I learned plenty, because it makes me think. Let's see if she's got it. I'll give it 2 more minutes.
Hey, Ira, Jake here yet. Joey asked me that question, jogged my memory. I had a question for you a week or so ago, but I kind of forgot. So, and I don't know enough about it. I don't know crap about it, but the Fed funds overnight deposits, somebody's saying that they're at an all-time high right now, like in the trillions, and they're usually not even close to like in the billions.
You're talking about the reverse repo market.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you are.
And what is that signaling? Is that signaling that the lenders are tightening up a little bit and have a sure thing, depositing with the Fed or their deposit holders?
Yes, they still have so much cash, and so they're putting the cash to the Fed and taking T-bills still, because that's where their comfort level is. There's still so much cash in the system. It's trillions. It's in a trillion, and it's really causing problems for some of the money markets who don't have access to it.
But it spiked up
Yeah.
quite a ways in the last
Yeah.
couple months.
Yep, and it's still sitting here. I'm proud to say my daughter teaches me more about it, Alex, and she's probably the top reporter on that. She covers it for Bloomberg. She covers the actual Fed markets. So that's one of her, and she keeps looking at this and the people she talks to, and this is what guys like Zoltan Pozar really excel at. So this is an issue. What it means, we really don't know yet. And especially, see, some of it is because there's a shortage of bills, and you need bills for the, you need short-term treasuries for the repo, for the collateral market. And so
Sure.
people will park their cash, but because tax receipts ran so hot this quarter or the last quarter that there was really a shortage of bills.
So that might be causing some of that Fed funds or the cash to park as well.
Yeah, it might be. It might be. I'm happy to say that Lori Logan, who runs the Fed trading desk, the system open market account, she's leaving. I think it's a loss for them, but she's going to be the president of the Dallas Fed now. And believe me, this Fed board, by what they do, shows you how little they understand about markets. They need somebody who really understands market involved in the conversation in a regular and deep manner.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's another really good question. I didn't get a response. I was waiting to see whether she had a response. If I get one, I will text Matt. But usually I do get something. Let me ask my daughter, see if she's around.
Ira, would you also mind mentioning again what literature you mentioned us to read? I forget the name of it. I don't know if it was a book or if it was papers.
The brothers Karamazov chapter.
Just on that one chapter. That was the Grand Inquisitor. You could probably get it online, the one chapter at Google. Just put in Grand, they'll probably try to sell it to you at Amazon, but you can probably find the one chapter on Google. I mean, if
amen to that.
And read the brothers Karamazov, more power to you. It's, you learn to love Dostoevsky. I'm a Dostoevsky lover, hence my blog is Notes from Underground, which is a book worth reading anyway. And it's not a long book for Dostoevsky, it's really short. But it is, wait, hold on. I just got something posted. The Xi Putin call took place on Xi's 69th birthday. So Xi and Putin had a long discussion today. Both leaders desire to to reinforce a personal friendship, and that has helped take China-Russia relationship to the closest point since the early years of the Cold War, which is really true, because Russia and China break fully apart in 1957. So there's a lot of stuff on this. The Wall Street Journal has an article, but lots of stuff going on. If I get anything back from Danielle, because I think she'll have a pretty good insight on Esther George, and I think it's an important insight. And we need to look at that, but that's about it. But I hope I was able to enlighten you a little bit.
Yeah, appreciate it, Ira. Ira, there's a I know your affinity with Bloomberg there, but the Odd Lots podcast is pretty interesting. I thought it was going to be pretty blasé and bland, but they do. It looks like they do a lot. They do their homework, and their guests are pretty interesting. They also did a podcast on Zoltan Pozar as well. But I posted 2 links in there.
Okay.
I think maybe for next time, I'd really like to pick your brain more on what they talk about is, copper being one of the tightest commodity markets they've ever seen.
I saw you posted that. I will get to that. And then believe me, I have no affinity for Bloomberg. I have an affinity for those who deliver. Listen, I respect good journalists. That's the end of the story. And I've lectured to enough financial journalist classes at Northwestern, because what's her name, who used to work for Hellerate, and then she was always on the floor, CC Rogers. I became friends with CC Rogers. So when she was a adjunct professor, she probably still is at Northwestern in the graduate school, and she teaches financial journalism. And every semester, and they were on the try, so I would always lecture to a journalist class about being a good because I said the more efficient the better questions you ask, the more you uncover, the easier you make my job. That was always our discussion.
Yeah.
So I just want people who deliver a good product. You know, if all you do is practice what I call access journalism, meaning that you just want access to the high and mighty and you won't ever ask them questions of significance, I have no time for it. I really don't. You know, and again, anybody who says to Jermone Powel, thank you, Chair Powell, for taking my question, I automatically have a problem with. I hope you ask the question. Well, most of the time, no, because you don't have to be polite. That's not your job. Your job is to be dogged in your tenaciousness.
Softball questions.
Oh, I can't stand it. Journalism in a democratic republic is supposed to serve a very important function, but of course everybody lines up now and it's just polarity, and I have no patience for it. It makes my job harder.